take care of a few things here. Uh, over on Trek World, Jim's been doing things, a series of videos based solely on the book Inside Star Trek by Herb Solow and Bob Justman. Which, yeah, a lot of inside information, stuff we never knew before, but they are not the most reliable narrators here. For instance, the story on talking about production of Sid and the Edge of Forever. One, it kind of overlooks the fact Harlan did his own book on that one some years back. I put a link in the description saying this is where you can get it. Talking about straight from the horse's mouth. That is straight from the horse's mouth. And also, he called out Herb Solow about in their book because they counted that Harlan, got drunk at a party and was ranting and raving. That Harlan didn't drink. Harlan said he had half a beer once when he was younger and made him sick, and he never touched the stuff after that. And he got kind of a half-hearted semi-back off thing, but not a retraction. Anything. Don't take everything out of the book. Again, it was written long after the thing. And again, there's stuff even Herb Solow wasn't necessarily privy to. Because he gets thinking about, you're still hearing stuff about, the unprecedented, second pilot. There was nothing unprecedented about it. And like I said, at the time that they were making Where No Man Has Gone Before, Desilu was making a second pilot for a sitcom for NBC. So sorry, Bob Justman. It was not unprecedented. It did not shake the world. It was like a third or fourth paragraph down in Variety. Oh, by the way, Desilu is doing a second pilot for this and a second pilot for that. It was a little unusual by the 60s. But it didn't cause shockwaves. It still happened even into the 70s. It may still be happening now. If the network really wants to do a project, they'll go through a few pilots and make see what they can get the thing right. But it wasn't that earth-shattering. Okay. Now, regarding the issue at hand, did Lucille Ball save Star Trek? Okay. Lucy, well, in it, she was the boss. She was the one who had to prove the thing in the first place. But it's not get carried away here. Like I said, she saw the title and thought it was about a bunch of, stars traveling the South Seas on a USO tour during the war. Even that long after Herb had dropped the script off in her dressing room. It's like she never bothered to pick the thing up and read it. The only direct involvement apparently that Lucy had in saving Star Trek is while they were shooting on Where No Man Has Gone Before, the last day of shooting. They're on the Delta Vega, and they're having problems getting a tracking shot done because there was crap on the rails for the camera. And they're ready next door in the next soundstage for a rap party. Lucy comes in, sparkling, cocktail dress, and and the director is, what? Come on, we're trying to get this last shot. And well, anything I can do? Well, tell you what, Lucy, if you can get a broom and sweep this crap out of the way so we can get this last shot, then sure enough, trooper she grabbed a broom, boom, boom, and they got the shot. Boom. Okay, crack open the champagne. That was it. That's the only direct involvement Lucy had in the production of Star Trek. Okay. Other than that, she wrote the checks and also the fighting against the board. That's overblown too. Some guys weren't great for it, but some are all for it. Okay. And some are and a few were lukewarm. They were concerned about the thing, but it's like something to keep in mind. In fact, here's what I put up here. The reason I'm doing this live so I can do this. Where are we? Get down here so we can see everything here. Now let's get up here. This was from August 17th, I think, possibly last year, but maybe this year. Let's see. Best known as the wacky physical comedian who starred in 4 successful series, Lucille Ball was also a Hollywood powerhouse and the force behind Desilu Studios, where everything from Andy Griffith's show to I Spy were filmed and where Star Trek was born. But just how much did Lucy have to do with launching the Starship Enterprise into the final frontier? This topic arrived to us by way of an August 6, 2020 tweet that has been widely shared, including attracting the attention of both William Shatner and George Takei Twitter accounts. And say, happy birthday, Lucille Ball, who saved Star Trek by vetoing the Desilu Studios Board of Directors' unanimous decision to cancel the show after the second pilot episode due to its high production costs. No. Great story, wonderful clickbait, but as we always like to ask, is it true? This is on facttrek.com. Let's go back a page because First things first, Star Trek as we know it would not exist without Lucille Ball. On November 9th, 1962, she purchased Desilu and Nez's stock interest in Desilu Productions, and with 52% of the company's stock, became the majority owner of the studio. With her ex-husband's departure, Ball also became the company's president. She was still in that position when Gene Roddenberry made a deal to develop pilots for Desilu in the spring of '64, including a science fiction format he called Star Trek. And going on down here. And again, would not have been made enough. Yeah. Yeah. To get a sense of just how many different versions of these events have been told over the years, all you have to do is search online for articles about how Lucille Ball saved Star Trek. Many of these accounts portray Lucy heroically swooping in to save one of the 2 pilots or the series itself from antagonists ranging from Desilu's own board of directors to the NBC television network. You might even have heard that she used her clout on NBC or opened her own wallet to finance a pilot. Every one of these accounts we've seen manages to mangle some or all of the facts. Let's examine the most prevalent ones one by one. Did Lucille Ball personally intervene with NBC to get them to order a second pilot? No. According to Bertie Weitzman, quoted in Desilu, the story of Lucille Ball and Desilu and Nez, 1993, by Coyne, Stephen Sanders, and Tom Gilbert, Lucille Ball did personally intervene with the television network to ensure that one of her pilots would get picked up. However, the network in question was CBS, and the pilot was Mannix. We went to Lucy and said, look, this show is very important to the company's future. We want you to call up CBS. Tell them you feel we have a terrific program and we want you to buy our show. She said, I can't do that. I've never done that before. We answered, but Lucy, our whole future may depend on this. CBS will listen to you. She didn't really believe it. She picked up the phone and called CBS. She said, this show is a good show. I'm calling you because I hear this show may not go on air. And I want you to know I'm supporting the show 100%. And I would be personally unhappy if CBS passed the show. 9 years it was on the air. My dad had a bit of a crush on Mannix's secretary, Peggy. Black lady, by the way. So anyway, you're racist. Look, this is why I was raised in. My dad had a crush on a black lady. While still married to my mom. Okay, so but note that, according to Weitzman, Lucille Ball had never called a network to ensure a Desilu pilot was picked up before Mannix, which was developed well after Star Trek. However, we found another source that disputes that claim. According to the book, The Complete Mission Impossible Dossier by Patrick J. White, Ball exerted pressure on CBS the season before Mannix to ensure that Mission Impossible made it to the airways, too. Gary Morton, Ball's second husband, told White that when word came down that the network had decided not to buy Mission, Lucy called up CBS chairman William Paley and told him it's the best pilot of the season. Other sources told White that Lucy threatened to walk away from the Lucy show if CBS didn't pick up Mission Impossible. Whatever the circumstances beyond the scenes, this network picked up Mission Impossible and it ran for 7 years. If Ball personally intervened to save both Mission Impossible and Mannix, what about Star Trek? According to the book Inside Star Trek, The Real Story, Herb Solo and Bob Justman, Lucille Ball was not involved with NBC's decision to order a second Star Trek pilot after NBC rejected the first attempt. In the book, Solar recounts the early 1965 meeting with several NBC executives after they rejected the first pilot. Okay, here's the phone call. I'm glad I get this because I was wondering where this. I know I'd seen this passage, but I forgot where. So talking about Mort Warner, Vice President of Programs and Talent. Grant Tinker and Jerry were all still taken by what we'd accomplished, and Mort had a complaint. Herb, you guys gave us a problem. Sorry, Mort, we tried our best. That's the problem. I didn't think Desilu was capable of making Star Trek, so when we looked over the pilot stories you gave us, we chose the most complicated and most difficult of the bunch. We recognize now it wasn't necessarily a story that properly showcased what Star Trek series potential. So the reason the pilot didn't sell was my fault, not yours. You guys did your job too well, and I screwed up. I shook my head in awe. No, this wasn't a network executive talking to me. This was a good witch of the north, a good witch of the east, come to lay gold on my feet. I conjured up all my good thoughts. So let's do a second pilot. That's exactly why we're here. We'll agree on some mutual story and script approval, and then if the scripts are good, we'll give you more money for another pilot. So why might Lucille Ball have been less involved with NBC over Star Trek than she reportedly had been with CBS over Mannix and Mission Impossible? For one thing, Lucille Ball had a certain amount of leverage with CBS that she did not have with NBC. CBS passed on Star Trek after a notorious pitch by Gene Roddenberry and Oscar Katz, but that's the topic for another. Yeah, that one. Ball had a long history with CBS, going at least as far back as her starring role on CBS radio comedy My Favorite Husband in 1948. And, of course, the classic I Love Lucy started in 1951. I'm not wearing my glasses. By 1965, CBS had been home to 12 Desilu-produced shows, many of them hits, and Lucy was still one of the network's top stars. While it may not have had an impact and longevity of I Love Lucy, The Lucy Show, 62-68, was in the Nielsen Top 10 every year it was on the air. CBS wanted to stay in the Lucy business for as long as her popularity continued. To do that, the network made a number of concessions to Desilu, including, by the mid-60s, a generous pilot development fund of $600,000 a year. That fund largely paid for the expensive Mission Impossible and Mannix pilots, but it didn't cover any of the costs for Star Trek. When it came to NBC, however, the network had long been a tough nut for Desilu to crack. Indeed, when Star Trek made its U.S. debut in September 8, 1966, it was only the second show in Desilu history to air on NBC. Desilu's first game show, called You Don't Say, ran on the network from 63-69. This all suggests that Lucy could be very involved with Desilu's shows, especially if they were on CBS. But if there's any evidence that CBS pushed NBC to prove or find a Star Trek second pilot, we haven't seen it. So, and the next one. Did Lucille Ball support Star Trek because she was personally invested in Gene's vision? We struggled to find any information about Lucille Ball's opinion of Star Trek. If she ever discussed the series in an interview, either during the making of the series or afterwards, we haven't seen it. Only one piece of correspondence from Ball survives in the Star Trek papers at UCLA, a note sent to Gene Roddenberry, Herb Solo, and others involved with the series, congratulating them for the show's early and short-lived rating success, sent on October 5th, 1966, a few weeks after the series first aired. Dear Gene and the rest of your hardworking people, just heard the good news. I want you to know how proud and happy I am. Looks like you really have a hit on your hands, and we all appreciate your efforts. Love, Lucy. There's also a little piece of correspondence from Ball that's quoted in David Alexander's authorized biography of Gene Roddenberry from 1994, and the only one shared by Roddenberry Entertainment as part of their Roddenberry 366 initiative from 2016. We suspect that the currently private Roddenberry archives don't have any other substantial correspondence from the Desilu president, although we'd love to be proven wrong on that front. Gary Morton, who in addition to being Ball's second husband, became Desilu's vice president in charge of the television production of 66, describes how he and Lucy would read many scripts under pilot consideration in the Sanders Gilbert Desilu book, but says that Star Trek was never a script brought to us. Herb Solo claims that the Star Trek script was brought to Lucille Ball, but says she had no comments and speculates she never even read it. In the quote here, I personally walked the Star Trek pilot script into Lucy's dressing room and handed it to her. Lucy, this is the Star Trek pilot script. There will be lots of changes, so if you have any comments, let me have them, because there'll be ample time to implement them. Lucy never mentioned the script, and the day the completed pilot was screened for NBC on the West Coast, I walked into Lucy's dressing room to tell her that NBC's reaction. The pilot script was still there, apparently untouched. In short, we haven't seen any evidence that Ball had an opinion on Star Trek Beyond, hoping for a long and successful run. It's possible she never even read the script before the pilot was made, unless further evidence emerges. This claim seems to be completely unfounded. Did Lucille Ball personally finance either Star Trek pilot? Both Star Trek pilots were partially financed by NBC, but the network did not cover 100% of those costs. So how much was the balance and who paid it? According to financial records in the Star Trek papers at UCLA, NBC paid $185,000 for the first Star Trek pilot, which was initially budgeted at $323,281. A figure increased to $451,503 a few days before filming began. Despite that increase, first pilot went significantly over budget, costing $651,751. That's in $64. That left Desilu on the hook for almost $500,000, $430,070 to be exact. The second pilot cost $354,974 to produce, and NBC paid for $209,000, or about 59% of the total cost. However, there's simply no evidence that Lucille Ball spent her personal fortune financing either pilot. Desilu's annual and interim financial reporting from this period, publicly accessible, are at the Margaret Herrick Library in Beverly Hills, indicate that the studio absorbed the extra costs of these and other pilots. Studios produced a total of 5 pilots during the 64-65 fiscal year, and wrote off the costs for the pilots that the networks turned down. In other words, Lucille Ball, being an old saw, this thing followed. We learned the first rule of show business within the producers: never put your own money in the show. The second rule of show business: never put your own money in the show. Okay. Did Star Trek's expense force Lucille Ball to sell Desilu? Here's the nut of it right here. This is one of the major claims made by author Mark Cushman in the self-published These Are the Voyages books, which he reiterated in an interview with Mark A. Altman and Edward Gross for the book The 50-Year Mission, The Complete Uncensored Unauthorized Oral History of Star Trek for first 25 years. That's also a good couple of books there, too. Lucy's instinct were right about Star Trek, and that it would become one of the biggest shows in syndication ever. The problem was that her pockets weren't deep enough. They were losing $15,000 an episode, which would be like $500,000 per episode today. If she could have hung on just 6 months longer, it would have worked out, because by the end of the second season, once they had enough episodes, Star Trek was playing in, I believe, 60 different countries around the world, and all of that money was flowing in. It's just that she couldn't last those extra 6 months. Cushman speaks to Lucy's instincts, but cites no evidence as to how he knows what she thought about the potential longevity of Star Trek. Without that, it is pure speculation on his part. Furthermore, he overstates what those $1960 would equal in modern times by a factor of 5. When it comes to the claim that Star Trek was losing $15,000 an episode when Lucille Ball sold Desilu to Gulf Western, that figure is actually too low. According to a financial analysis done by Paramount in 1968, excluding pilot costs, Star Trek had been losing an average of $28,354 per episode before the Desilu acquisition. During the same period, and also excluding pilot costs, Mission Impossible had been losing an average of $26,470 per episode, while Mannix lost an impressive average of $32,000 per episode, $306 per episode. However, focusing on these losses overlooks the fact that deficit financing was the standard practice for television production going back to the early 1950s, and that Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and Mannix were planned and budgeted to be deficit financed from the get-go. As to how deep Desilu's pockets were, according to the company's financial reporting to its shareholders from 54 to 67, we do not have access to earlier financial reporting, Desilu reported a loss in net revenue only once in 1963, a loss of $655,000. That's right after she bought out Desi. In 1967, the same year Lucille Ball decided to sell the studio, Desilu reported net revenues of $1,269,196. The most net revenue the company had reported to shareholders in a decade. And did Lucille Ball overrule her entire board of directors to produce either Star Trek pilot and or the weekly series itself? By far the most common anecdote about Lucille Ball and Star Trek is that Desilu's board was unanimous in its vote to cancel the project, and Lucy overruled them and ordered Star Trek to continue. Exactly when this vote took place varies widely depending on the account. Sometimes it's before the first pilot was filmed, sometimes before the second pilot was filmed, sometimes it's after the network made its series commitment, and sometimes it falls in the midst of the show's network run. We suspect that part of the reason the timing of the meeting is so fungible is that it is derived from two separate first-hand accounts, one from Ed Hawley and one from Herb Solo, and those two accounts do not agree when the meeting took place. First is the version by Ed Hawley and in the Sanders Gilbert Desilu book. According to Ed Hawley, Lucy demonstrated particular courage in clinching the Mission Impossible deal with CBS. One of the biggest decisions that had to be made was when she went against my recommendation and Argyle Nelson's recommendation that had to do with Star Trek and Mission Impossible. According to our estimates, we would lose $65,000 per episode on each series. We didn't have the financial strength to afford that type of show, and we recommended Lucy and the board that we not do the pilots, much less the series. I told Lucy, if we do these, are unfortunate enough to sell them to series, we're going to have to sell the company and go bankrupt. Lucy deliberated for a bit and then made the decision she wanted to do them. She adds, if it were not for Lucy, there would be no Star Trek today. Hawley described this board meeting as taking place when both the Mission Impossible and Star Trek pilots were still being prepared prior to shooting. However, that's impossible. Star Trek's first pilot was filmed on November 27 through December 18, 1964. The Mission Impossible pilot did not go before the cameras until December 65, a full year later, and wasn't being developed until after Star Trek's first pilot was completed. It's possible that Hawley, who died in 2010, was recalling a board meeting that happened in the early summer of 65 when the second Star Trek pilot was being prepared for filming. It shot July 19th to 29th, 65. And the Mission pilot was in early development. But it's hard to believe that a reasonable financial estimate could have been made about the potential losses of Mission at that point, since a first draft script would not even be delivered until October of 65. The second version by Herb Solo in Inside Star Trek describes a similar board meeting, but that states that it took place after NBC made its series commitment to Star Trek, which would place it in late February 1966. I had the series order from NBC. I had a diehard group of professionals to make the series. I had a lot of sleepless nights. Now all I needed was the financial support of the studio elders, the very conservative Desilu loyalists. This would all start and end with America's favorite redhead, Lucille Ball herself. The old guard made its position quite clear. It wasn't a difficult position for them to take, considering the high cost of both pilots, and their position was, simply put, don't let Solo and the rest of the crazies loose. Things are good. Things could get worse. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't give the inmates keys to the asylum. Before the board meeting, I laid it out to the owners of Desilu. You'll always have a show, Lucy, with the same actors, the same staff, the same people to write and direct. Everyone will be happy. The studio will keep renting space to other shows, so fame isn't a problem and money isn't a problem. But wouldn't you like to rebuild Desilu's prestige, importance, and value as a major player? Wouldn't it be great to have two exciting and successful Desilu television shows on the air? Say yes, Lucy, and we'll all go to work. Lucy nodded, and we all went to work, and the inmates had the keys to the asylum. Our suspicion is that Ed Hawley's memory of the meeting's timing is wrong, and that it took place later, after CBS and NBC had made serious commitments for Mission Impossible and Star Trek, but before those commitments had been announced in the trades. Of note, neither Solo nor Hawley describe a unanimous vote on behalf of the board to kill Star Trek and Mission Impossible before Lucy weighed in. Hawley says that he and Argyle and Nelson advised against proceeding with either series. Solo says that the old guard advised against the same, but there were 6 members of the board at the time of this meeting, in addition to Lucille Ball, Oscar Katz, Edwin Hawley, Arthur Manella, W. Argyle, Nelson Sr., Curtis Palmer, and Milton A. Rudin. Of the names on that list, we know at least one who supported Star Trek and Mission Impossible, Oscar Katz. Then Herb Solo's boss, Katz, was at Desilu from April 64 to March 66, 2 pilot seasons. It was Katz's job to get more Desilu produced shows on the network at Airways. When he was hired away from CBS to work at Desilu, the notice in the Variety made the clear, stating, Desilu Productions was once an important furnisher of primetime programming, but today the Lucille Ball plant has only one series left, the half-hour show starring the boss, Lucy Show. Desilu has brought in Oscar Katz as production VP and is now aligning creative talent in an attempt to restore Desilu to the place it once held in the market, the network sub. And there's the list of all these guys. So where's the truth? The memes and various self-appointed trick experts assert that Ball was some sort of guardian angel saving the show from short-sighted penny pinchers, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Yes, as a majority shareholder on the board, she had the power to kill any project, including Star Trek. That she didn't isn't quite the same thing as actively going to bat for the show against NBC. The rest of the board and whatever newly imagined obstacle was possibly, going against NBC, the rest of the board and whatever newly imagined obstacle was posited for her to knock down. Herb Solo's contention was that Desilu needed to make pilots like Star Trek and Mission Impossible to prove its capabilities to networks who might have considered them an also-ran production company. Where the rubber really met the road was when both NBC and CBS picked up such costly series. A pilot could be expensive, but it was a one-time cost. The real concern was if the network could afford to deficit finance each show week after week. Apparently, Lucy thought so, but it appears that she wasn't alone, and the numbers prove that decision sound. Either way, while she might have swooped in and saved the day, Ball clearly had a significant say in what happened to Star Trek, and we'll always love Lucy for that. So, and I think we're done with that there. But also, nothing happens in a vacuum. We all can hyper focus on this is why I'm start. Again, Desilu was one of the busiest lots in Hollywood at the time. Now let's went in to take advantage of Google's little thing here. Put this down here. Just a question: how many television programs were being produced on the Desilu lot in 1967? That's a crucial year. It's between 15 and 16 television programs. Because you got these 4 directly by Desilu: Lucy Show, Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and Mannix. And then where they're renting out space, the Andy Griffith Show. It was done on the 40-acre lot. Gomer Pyle, Hogan's Heroes, also the 40-acre lot. Gomer Pyle, they had a boot camp. Their base was out there. They're a very big lot. Quite a loss. That Girl, Family Affair, I Spy, My Three Sons, The Mothers-in-Law, that debuted Good Morning World, Accidental Family, no, not considered one of the better, The Guns of Will Sonnet, and Rango. So, and again, 67 was the most profitable year they'd seen in a decade. So no, Lucy did not have to sell the studio. They held on 6 more months. No, they were making money. It's not like they're just spending money and nothing's coming back. Let's just focus on Star Trek. Yeah, they're spending much, but NBC is also paying Desilu to run Star Trek. And there's the ad revenue that gets divvied up, and they're getting some of that too. And all the other shows, and all the shows they had been, because again, I Live Lucy is in syndication right now, so that money's running in here, and all the shows that My Favorite Martian by now is in syndication. So you got all that money coming in, and you got the money coming from existing shows. No, they were not bankrupt by any stretch of the imagination. They was the most profitable year in '67. Lucy was burned out of being a studio exec. She was tired of fighting these battles and having to go, all the headaches and the board. Yeah, it's money. I just want to do my show. Okay. She didn't start in this business to be a studio mogul. She just wanted to, like they're telling Rick, I want to be on the show. And she, then she kept doing. She the Lucy Show is not the last production of Desilu. There's a few more shows she did on there. After the Lucy Show was Here's Lucy, and again, he was selling to Paramount. No, they didn't. She didn't sell to Paramount. Gulf Western bought Paramount and Desilu and smashed them together. I think they may have got Paramount slightly before that, but it was really Gulf Western who did the buyout here. And Paramount was just their next door neighbor, the other side of the fence. But yeah, like I said, we all love Lucy, but she could barely be counted on knowing what the show even was. Okay. I'd like to know when she finally realized it was a science fiction show. It's not about a USO tour. But really, okay. Again, you can't just go by one source. You got in doing a deep dive on Gene Roddenberry. I never got in just his authorized biography. I also read the unauthorized biography. I read Susan Sackett's book on it, and anything I can get a clearer picture of the elephant. Okay, don't just go by the. I think you put it all together and get the good, the bad, you get a better picture of like what was this guy all about. And I think I've been proven right a few times of knowing what was Gene thinking. Okay. How would he have done this, and why do you do this? And I think, yeah, I can see him doing that kind of thing. Like there's been a few, nothing truck world. It's like some of the supposedly hero communicators. No, the actual props are pretty much accounted for. There's a couple we can't lay our hands on right now, but when something shows up, it's like that doesn't look right. This was given by Roddenberry himself. He said, Roddenberry said a lot of things. A lot of them not true. He was very much a Hollywood producer. He would say what he felt he needed to say to get what he wanted. And he got a bunch of these, 70s replicas. In fact, actually, in the comment section on that one, no, I've got that very same one because that's the same flaws. It was made by a prop maker in the 70s, and Roddenberry got a bunch of it. He would hand them out to people he felt could help get Phase 2 made. Here's get some support, get some buzz going, and here's a souvenir, direct from the man himself. One thing Roddenberry knew is how to schmooze. But after all this time, it's like, I have never been of the opinion, like the end, the last bit of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. When when the legend becomes truth, print the legend. I'd never cottoned to that. We have enough of legends going on. It's time we got to the actual crap, okay? We like to break things down to good guys, bad guys, simple things. Star Trek's production history is a mess, okay? It's all over the place. There's many factors. There's very little, one thing happened this and change. No, there are a lot of little factors why the first pilot was rejected. And I said, that we didn't think you'd be able to do it. Okay, we don't think this showcase what this show can actually do, but you did a good job. And it was a mess. And also, and again, I think part of why they picked the hardest one is one, they weren't sure Desilu could do it, but they really didn't want to work with Roddenberry again because of Lieutenant. You got to factor in all this stuff beforehand. And Roddenberry did not just pop out of the heavens and land on NBC's doorstep. They had worked with him on the Lieutenant, and they didn't like it. Okay, this was only a few months. You also remember the timeline. Lieutenant was ended in 1960, February 64. The pilot started filming a few months later, but then you got the pitch process, and it was known while the Lieutenant was still on the air that Roddenberry was prepping a sci-fi project. A few months before that first pitch, was finally done in March. This is in January. He hit the trades. Yeah, Roddenberry he's working on a sci-fi project. Keep an eye out. He's in Variety. That's something. You got to look at really unbiased sources. Not just, the book by Solo and Justman and, the Mark Alexander, the others. The Desilu book is a good one there because it's just the entire studio. They don't give a shit one way or the other. And their book, Star Trek's no different than My Favorite Martian or Mannix or Mission Impossible. It's another production on the ledger. But also the trades. You can, a decent public library will have all Variety going back, who knows how long. And Variety been, since the 30s, at least. But they, I think they got an online database on their website. And you can dig up stuff like that first review where they misspelled Leonard Nimoy's name. Described Billy Shatner's acting as wooden. First time Shatner's ever been described as wooden. Okay. But there was a typo. It said Leonard Nimoy. But let's dial back the mythic status of some of these things. Lucille Ball was important, but she was not God. Okay. Other than the fact that she ran the studio and could veto anything at a whim. But she didn't. And it's nice that she didn't, but let's not get carried away. With that, PayPal, Patreon, yada, yada, yada down below. Like, share, subscribe, and we will talk at you later.